And you would think that the news would be less ridiculous than that opener. You would be wrong, my friends. President Trump is headed over to Singapore for his meeting with Kim Jung Un, the human time bomb, a man who looks as though he was built in the model of fat man and little boy. So he apparently is meeting with President Trump one-on-one, which is just the way you want this meeting to start. What you really want in a meeting between President Trump and Kim Jung Un, a dictator of a country and a guy who is most famous for not reading his morning briefings, is a one-on-one meeting. Now listen, I think that President Trump is good at a great many things. I do not think that he is a great negotiator one-on-one with people armed with nuclear weapons. Just a hunch. I'm not sure that this is the way you want this meeting going. Now, maybe President Trump surprises us all. Maybe what's actually happening here is that Kim Jung Un, the dictator of North Korea, blew up his nuclear mountain. Maybe he destroyed his nuclear mountain, right? There's been talk about this. He has a nuclear mountain that was hollowed out so that he could actually do bomb tests in there, and he blew the thing up, apparently. So it's possible that he's now coming to the West and saying, guys, I'm ready to disarm, because he disarmed himself by blowing up his nuclear mountain, and Trump is just the beneficiary of that. We're going to find out. But President Trump is meeting with him, and it's not clear what the agenda is going to look like. So first of all, I love this. Vice President Pence was asked about President Trump's preparations for all of this. And it's pretty spectacular. What he said at the Faith and Freedom Coalition is, quote, now comes the historic summit between the President of the United States and Chairman Kim of North Korea. As President Trump said this week, he approaches the summit with confidence. The truth is, he's been preparing for this his whole life. When? Honestly, I just have to ask, was President Trump preparing for it when President Trump was, posing for the cover of Playboy? Or was he more doing it when he was banging around, the clubs in the 1970s? Or was he mostly doing it when he was on the set of The Celebrity Apprentice? I'm fine with President Trump handling these negotiations. He can't handle negotiations with a nuclear-armed or semi-nuclear-armed country worse than President Barack Obama handled the negotiations with the Iranians, right? There's just no way to do that. So I'm not saying that this goes horribly, but Vice President Pence has a dramatic tendency, I think, to overstate the genius of the man for whom he works, even though he's really elected by the American people and he really works for us. But his boss, right, the President of the United States, he's very fond, you may have noticed. In any case, President Trump did a presser as he was leaving the G7. This is the last presser that he has done before he headed over to the Singapore meeting. I know that a lot of people who are really optimistic about this thing. I'm far less optimistic. I don't think that you ought to give a meetup to a dictator of a country without actually going in with some preconditions, like here's what you're going to give up. Kim hasn't really given anything up. He gave up a few hostages. I guess that's something, but I'm not sure that you had to guarantee a meeting in order to make that happen. You probably could have done that with a little bit of cash or with some low-level negotiations. Elevating a dictator who is enslaving millions of people in a giant gulag to the status of world leader doesn't seem to me like a great move. I was angry when Barack Obama met with the Iranians. I was angry when Barack Obama met with the Cubans. You remember, he went over to Cuba, which is another gulag state. And then he hung out there and went to a baseball game, and everybody on the right was angry about it. They're fighting mad about it. Same people on the right who are fighting mad about that are not fighting mad about President Trump meeting with Kim Jong Un with no preconditions and really no agenda. When I say there's no agenda, it's not really me who's just saying this. Here's President Trump explaining what the agenda is and how he thinks this thing is going to go.
Well, there's always everything. It's really, this has probably rarely been done. It's unknown territory in the truest sense. But I really feel confident. I feel that Kim Jong Un wants to do something great for his people, and he has that opportunity, and he won't have that opportunity again. It's never going to be there again.
Okay, so obviously they're going in with a clear agenda, and I love that President Trump explains the clear agenda. He's asked, what is the objective of these meetings? Here is his explanation.
I have a clear objective, but I have to say, Eliana, that it's going to be something that will always be spur of the moment. You don't know.
Okay, so which is it? Is there a clear objective, or is it going to be spur of the moment? I know that that's how I go into all my contract negotiations. I say, I have a clear objective, but I'm going to go and just, it's spur of the moment. Just going to wing it. Bring a disco ball, maybe some sangria, just have a good time. I mean, that's what I do. So I don't know what this is supposed to accomplish. Now, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this accomplishes everything. Maybe we end up with in denuclearized North Korea. I am skeptical at best, because the fact is that Kim Jung Un is not going to give up his nuclear weapons. The reason he's not going to give up his nuclear weapons is the minute that he does, he's now vulnerable to a Western coup attempt. That's the reason he's pursuing this thing in the first place. And according to the Associated Press, President Trump plans to depart early from his unprecedented summit with Kim Jong Un, the White House said on Monday, declaring that nuclear talks with North Korea have moved more quickly than expected. Okay? Trump had been scheduled to fly back to Washington on Wednesday morning after spending Tuesday with the North Korean leader in Singapore. But on the eve of the summit, he altered his schedule, opting to return about 8 p.m. on Tuesday after a full day of meetings with Kim, almost 15 hours earlier than previously anticipated. This is probably a smart move by the White House, because what you don't want is for Trump to stick around and for Kim to go out and say something publicly, and then Trump says something publicly, and then they get into a fist fight or something. The White House said in a statement, the discussions between the United States and North Korea are ongoing and have moved more quickly than expected. It wasn't immediately clear what specific progress, if any, had been made in the preliminary discussions between the U.S. and North Korean officials in the run-up to the Tuesday summit. In fact, only hours before the White House announcement, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had seemed to lower expectations for the meeting, which Trump had predicted could potentially yield an on-the-spot deal to end the Korean War. And here's the problem with President Trump generally when it comes to negotiations. President Trump is a great marketer. I mean, it is the thing he is best at. He's amazing at marketing. Well, if you are very good at marketing, one of the things you tend to do is overpromise. You tend to do this, right? Every commercial you have ever watched is a case of somebody overpromising, right? When you watch a commercial on TV and they show you those nice, juicy burgers that look amazing, what those really are those plastic mock-ups that have been sprayed with water, so they look all moist and juicy, and if you ate them, you would literally choke and die. Right? Because virtually every ad on television is an oversell. Well, President Trump does a lot of overselling. He says he has the biggest crowds ever. He said that his campaign movement was the biggest ever. He says that this negotiation is going to be the biggest. Everything is the biggest ever. Everything is unprecedented, the biggest ever. Well, the problem is when you oversell an international negotiation, people sort of expect that's going to happen. Pompeo said on Monday, we are hopeful the summit will have set the conditions for future successful talks, which is really him saying, we didn't really get much done here. And then President Trump said, what was his actual objective? Well, he explained, again, at the G7 what his actual objective was. He said he had a clear objective, but it's going to be spur of the moment, which is weird. And then he said that the minimum would be, and this is really what Trump thinks about the art of the deal, his book, The Art of the Deal, which was not written by President Trump. That's really not how he negotiates. President Trump is very into personal relationships. He negotiates with people. I mean, I know a lot of people who know President Trump, knew him before he was president. President Trump is very reliant on him forging ties with the person with whom he is negotiating. He likes to have a good personal relationship with the person with whom he is talking. And that's essentially what he said about Kim Jung Un.
Well, I think the minimum would be relationship. You'd start at least a dialogue. Because, as a deal person, I've done very well with deals. What you want to do is start that. Now, I'd like to accomplish more than that. But at a minimum, I do believe at least we'll have met each other. We will have seen each other. Hopefully we will have liked each other, and we'll start that process.
So the president of the United States is very much focused on whether he gets along with foreign leaders. We'll see that this comes up in a different context when we get to the G7, because his relationships with foreign leaders at the G7 are not going so swimmingly. But if he believes that he's going to forge some sort of personal tie with Kim Jung Un, that, I think, is a mistake. Again, I do not think that negotiations generally are based on personal ties between leaders. I don't think that it was that Ronald Reagan had this wonderful relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev, and that's why he got an end to the Cold War. It's really more like the Soviets had bankrupted themselves, and they were attempting, really, I mean, you look at their internal documents, and this is what they were saying. They were attempting to hold on to their Soviet empire, but they just didn't have the money or the resources to do so. This was also true with regard to, for example, South Africa, which wanted to disarm. The reason they wanted to disarm is because they wanted to be reintegrated into the family of nations. It wasn't that the leadership of South Africa had wonderful relationships with the West, and so they decided to do a deal. Now, I've been part of several major business deals myself. A good relationship is not harmful, but if there's no confluence of interest, then a personal relationship is not going to mean very much. I've gotten along with a lot of people with whom I've tried to do a deal, and the deal just never comes together. I've done a lot of deals with people who I don't particularly like, but there's a confluence of interest, and so that happens. Now, President Trump's view of a deal, which is that you get in a room, you hash it out, you make friends with people, it means that President Trump is very good in the room, but it also means that he could be suckered. And this is why I don't like the idea of him being alone in a room with Kim Jung Un and just their translators. First of all, you never know what the translator for the North Koreans is actually going to say back to Kim Jung Un. I mean, I assume that Trump's translator will know, but that's pretty much it. And second of all, Trump alone in a room with people has not ended well in terms of negotiations. The last time Trump was alone in a room with somebody, he was alone in a room with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and he offered them a budget deal that broke the bank and overruled his own Republican Party. The time before that, he was alone in the room with foreign leaders. He was alone in a room with the foreign ambassador from Russia, and he ended up saying to him, they fired James Comey over the Russian investigation. So I just think there's a situation rife with the possibility for problems. Maybe nothing comes of it. But if nothing comes of it, then what was the purpose of any of this other than, I guess, a photo op that makes Kim Jung Un look stronger in the world as a parallel leader with the most powerful leader on planet Earth? The entire media treating it as a coup that Trump is meeting with Kim Jung Un, I just don't understand that mentality. It's a coup for Kim Jong Un that he gets to meet with the President of the United States. It'd be a coup for you if you got to meet with the president of the United States. It would not be a coup for you if you got to meet with Kim Jung Un. It would likely mean you were about to be shot. Okay, so I have a few more thoughts on this.